So let's talk about the kid where you've tried everything and you're still having challenges. What we're going to do is elicit from the youngster, rather than impose, you may call it natural consequences of what he did, or logical consequences, as long as the adult imposes, the kid has no ownership of it. And people don't argue with their own decisions. So here's how it works. Let me share with you how I started this. Ron was an 8th grade student. 3 days before the big event of the year, the 8th grade party, Ron did something which is simply unacceptable. And the conversation went like this. Ron, what you did was simply on a level that was unacceptable. What do you suggest we do about it? Now, I'm going to suggest, as I stop here and pause for a moment, write down the following. Write down this question and the following that you will ask. Have it in your hip pocket. The question is, what do you suggest we do about it? We, not you, what do we suggest we do about it? And be ready to ask, what else, until what the youngster says is acceptable to you and you believe it will help the youngster help himself. Ron, this is simply on a level which is unacceptable. What do you suggest we do about it? And after about 5 seconds, he said, I guess I shouldn't go to the 8th grade party. And I responded, I can live with that. Now, this is a big event in this kid's life. Now, if his parents would have come to me and said, what do you mean preventing my kid from going to the 8th grade party? My response would have been, talk to your son. It was his decision. Which they did not do, of course. Now, what would the usual approach been? Ron, you're not going to the 8th grade party. In which case, I would have been the bad guy and he would have been the victim. What I did is I elicited a consequence from him. Now, the usual approach would be not to elicit a consequence, but to elicit a procedure. So, for example, Bill sticks his foot out every time Bob's walked by to trip his friend. And the conversation goes something like this. And again, this is in the resource guide. You realize every time you stick your foot out, you're a victim of your impulses? Do you really want to go through life being a victim? Or do you want to be a victor? Do you want to be in control? If you want to be in control, let's think of a procedure that will help you be in control. You may think of a bowling ball or your foot in cement, but unless you have a procedure to redirect your thinking, your action, you're going to go through life being a victim. So normally what I will do is I will elicit from the youngster some procedure, or in Ron's case, a consequence. Now, this is not what most people do. Most people will overpower the kid. And I used to do that too, in my youth, so to speak. One of my many positions was being an assistant principal of supervision and control of a high school of 3,200 kids. I was a bad guy on campus. If somebody was going to be suspended, I was the one who would do it. I tried to be fair, and I tried to be consistent. And I realized that I was not being fair. I was being consistent, but was not being fair. For example, 2 kids are sent to the office for fighting. One of these kids continually is picking on the other kid. And finally, this kid defended himself. Is it fair to suspend them both? Most people would say no. And I agree, it was not fair, even though that's what I did. So hence I developed a much better procedure of eliciting. But again, Stephen Covey's first habit, being proactive. I did teaching. And it sounded like this in my classroom. Let's assume that, just for the sake of conversation, one of you or 2 of you acts on a level which is inappropriate. Would you like me, notice I'm giving them the option, I'm prompting them to reflect, would you like me to treat you all exactly the same as an amorphous group, or would you like me to treat you as individuals? Well, you can guess what they said. They all want to be treated as individuals. Therefore, if Bob did something and what I elicited from Bob was different than I elicited from Jack, I had already set it up so that they realize, okay, what we're doing is in their kid's own best interest. And if you have a parent that said, what do you mean you did this with this kid but not with this kid? You're a teacher. You teach the parents. You ask them the exact same question that you asked your class. Would you like me to treat your son or your daughter as just a member of an amorphous group, or would you like me to work with your son and daughter what's going to be best in his or her own best interest? Every parent will say, I want what's going to be best for my kid. So notice what you've done. Throughout the entire program, you are proactive. You're setting up ahead of time rather than the usual approach of a kid does something and then you are reacting to it. You are responding to something that the kid does. Be in control. And you're in control, again, procedures you teach, the 3 principles to practice, and in the raised responsibility system, after it's taught, you then have the kid reflect to identify the level that he has chosen, and that takes care of the vast majority of kids. There will only be a very few kids who you will have to elicit a consequence or procedure from them. There are a few points about guided choices that need to be reviewed. Although the program is non-coercive, it does not mean it is permissive. The teacher is always in charge. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, some young people only see the light when they feel the heat. By now you know from your own experiences that if you put anyone into a position that the person feels that they are losing their own dignity, counter-will is going to set in. The person is going to self-defend. Now, in the program, the youngster will not be allowed to continue behaving on one of the inappropriate levels of behavior, level A or level B. But it's important that you do not put the person where he or she is going to lose dignity, because if you do, you will most likely find yourself in a confrontational situation. The youngster, by the very nature of counter-will, is going to self-defend. As an example of one student harassing or bullying another student, imposing the same consequence or punishment may be consistent, but it is not fair. A more consistent and fair approach is to be consistent in the process. Now let's look at some of the advantages of eliciting in contrast to imposing a consequence or punishment. Remember that the one key to success is honing in on the skill of asking reflective questions rather than telling, which is what we are accustomed to doing. Now, this is going to take some practice, and you're going to feel uncomfortable or strange when you first start asking instead of telling. When new brain connections become your default, you will ask yourself, why didn't I think about this sooner? It's so easy and so effective. To get to the mode of eliciting, think of a recent situation and vocalize what you could have said to that student. Now, do this before you continue, because it is essential that you practice if you want to be effective. Outstanding performers in any field visualize and practice rather than just relying on reading or hearing something.